Hello friends, Archangel with CryptoAngel here. I would like to put forth a video for the ShibaSwap berry bone rewards, much like the ShibaSwap dig bone rewards video that I did a few hours ago. I'm surprised at the number of requests that I got to do this video, and so I wanted to go ahead and put it out today while that was fresh in people's memory. But before we get into the actual numbers, I do want to go over some potential corrections and assumptions of what we will be looking at and what we will not be looking at. So these numbers will be covering the ShibaSwap liquidity event and the liquidity event only. So we're not taking into account this time decay for bone production after the liquidity event, or the when it starts at that 100 bone per block and moves down. So we know that the total number of bone per block has been revised from 1,000 total bone per block to 1,150 bone per block. So out of that 1,150 bone per block, 50 bone per block will be minted and distributed to the berry pools. Now, why I want to call attention to this is that as we go over here and look at these charts here, we've still got these percentages which don't work out neatly to 50 bone per block. So we're going to assume that these are going to be updated in the version 2.1 Woofpaper, and we're going to assume that this is 30 total bone per block for burying SHIB instead of 3%. Now, again, we're only going to be covering the total bone per block production for berry. We are not going to be taking into account the swap Ethereum transaction fees or the conversion into SHIB. So with that, the same with leash. Instead of 1% total bone per block, we're going to assume that is 10 bone per block, and we will not be taking into account the conversion of swap fees. And the same goes for bone. So that 1% of total bone per block, we're going to assume that's 10 bone per block, so we can hit that 50 number equally. Now, with that said, we're going to look at the chart here. We've got our 50 added up. But one of the things I'm going to do at a future time after ShibaSwap is launched is look at the token price for bone as well as the circulating supply at that time. So I do not want to speculate on what a token price can be, and so to kind of squash the any potential rumor mill, I'm not even going to fill that in. So we do know how much bone is going to be produced for each block that's being minted. And if you don't know what a block is, so with Ethereum, every several seconds, what's called a block of Ethereum is minted, and we're tagging the bone onto that. So you may see some spreadsheets out there with different numbers for the total bone production. And the reason for that is the assumption of time for how long it takes for that bone to be produced or minted rather. So I'm going with the assumption that a block is minted every 13.2 seconds. And you'll also see some spreadsheets out there that say 13.5. So that accounts for any differences in numbers that you may see. So I just want to make sure you understand where those numbers are coming from. Again, this is not financial advice. This is for education and informational purposes only. So make sure you do talk to your financial advisor and run your own spreadsheets. If you use somebody else's spreadsheets, make sure you understand all of the variables that are going into that. Now we'll look at the token price here. As of a few hours ago, these were fairly up to date. I haven't looked at the most recent pricing, but we were hovering around the $4,000 mark on leash and the 8121 price with 5 zeros for SHIB. So I think we're pretty familiar with our circulating supply. And this spreadsheet is assuming that all of the circulating supply are in the berry pool, which we know that's not going to happen, but this will give us a solid foundation of what the minimum production will be. So this doesn't take into account anybody who's got their tokens on centralized exchanges, or that tokens that will be blocked out of bone rewards due to being on the GER list. So with that, we'll run through here. And because the numbers are so small, we're going to go straight to the bone per token per 14-day period, which is the liquidity event. So one leash will produce 8.5 bone during the 14-day liquidity event. And the amount of SHIB is fairly negligible, but you have to remember that this is on a per token basis. So we're going to equalize that over here in a minute, but on a per token basis, it may not look like a lot, but we are dealing with millions, billions, and trillions of SHIB tokens, while over here we're dealing with single digits, tens, hundreds of leash tokens. And if you have over 1,000 leash tokens, you probably don't need to be watching this video anyway. You are retiring to your bat cave. So as we move over to where we're comparing the $100, so this is assuming that if we invested $100 in leash and $100 in SHIB, what would we get for that amount of money? So $100 would get us a 0.025 portion of a leash token, while with SHIB we would get a little over 12 million tokens. So with our production, and again the numbers are so small, we're just going to go straight to the end of see how much it produces for the entire liquidity event. But you can see for Berry, the difference honestly is not as far off as I expected it to be. So this is roughly 2.5 times more bone production for that $100 invested in leash than it is in SHIB. So that I expected that delta to be a little bit further apart, but this is actually good news for SHIB in that not only do you get this bone production, but you also get those Ethereum fees as well. Now, we do expect ShibaSwap to be the most awesomest decentralized exchange in the world, and so it will have high volumes that should potentially give you a decent amount of return on that Ethereum swap transaction fee. So again, we fully expected to see leash outperform SHIB on the bone production for the investment during the liquidity event, but I'm actually surprised at how little that delta is. So again, it's only 2.5 times more bone production with leash than with SHIB in Berry. So I hope these numbers have helped you, and that if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. And with that, Archangel out.